Film theory has changed. It's gonna change again, and along with it, the film industry is changing too. Maybe more in the last 10 years than in any time in its history. And it's given you, dear viewer, more power than you think you have. Let's talk about it. Hello, Internet! Welcome to my office in my home. I know this is a little different than what you might be expecting. Don't worry, this isn't a super serious video. I'd be on a couch for that. But this also felt like an important one to have face to face. Yeah, today you're seeing my ugly mug because it's an important anniversary. Just over a decade ago, Matt, Steph, and Jason started a brand new channel. Well, kind of. This was originally supposed to come out last year, and then FNAF dropped a trailer and we had to change plans. So I guess a decade and some change. Anyway, they took the idea of game theory, overthinking your favorite video games in ways that helped you learn about the real world, and applied that same idea to film and television. And thus, film theory was born. And now, over 600 videos, 120 shorts, 13.4 million subscribers, 3.4 billion views, and one host transition later, here we are. And I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for exploring the film and television we all love with us, whether that be looking at the dark truth of Disney for the upteenth time, crawling through the back rooms and solving analog horror, taking a children's animated TV series way too seriously, or predicting the future of some superhero universe and how one small detail changes everything. Cue the red circles and arrows on the thumbnail. We couldn't have done any of this without you, and I will forever be thankful. Some behind the scenes info here, but I actually heard about film theory really early on. I was editor number 3, brought on to theorist behind writer Foot of a Ferret and Ronnie. Rest in peace, man. We still miss you. Well, when I had my job interview with Matt and he wondered if I had any questions for him, I did the thing where you ask, hey, where do you see Theorist in 5 years? And he mentioned that they were going to launch film theory, and that was actually why they wanted more editors. It blew my mind because no one had ever really done something like this at the time, and I so badly wanted to be involved. Also, fun fact, Matt did that interview in full makeup as Captain Planet. I got the call and he was just completely blue. He laughed and said that it was for a collab. This video with the Warp Zone.
Captain Planet, he's our hero, gonna take pollution down to zero.
Classic stuff. And speaking of classic, we wanted to do something special for the 10th anniversary, so we put together a small collection. You can get the exclusive limited edition 10th anniversary hoodie I'm wearing right now, the 10th anniversary Film Theory Studios hat, and an awesome poster all over at theoryverse.store. I love color block clothing, so I'm super happy with how this hoodie turned out. Plus, it's really comfortable, not too thick, but still warm, and covered with a ton of little nods honoring 10 years of film theory. It's cozy. The hat was made to look like something a director would actually wear on set, and there may be some hidden secret designs on the underside. And the poster was created to look like a classic piece from the 80s and 90s. I adore how it all turned out, and they're just great ways to celebrate 10 years of film theory. So again, check those out over at theoryverse.store. But as I've been thinking about the last decade, it made me realize just how much these two industries that I love, enough so that talking about them has become my full-time job and passion, have changed. They've changed more in the past decade than maybe at any other time in history. Like, tell me, do you remember what the top movies from 10 years ago were? Or I guess 11 at this point, without looking it up. Can you think of the 10 biggest films that came out in 2015? Post some in the comments without cheating or looking it up. I'll give you a second to really think it over. Think you have a list? Cool. The number 1 movie of that year was Star Wars Episode 7: The Force Awakens, followed closely by Jurassic World and Furious 7. Avengers had their second outing with Age of Ultron, while the Minions had their first solo adventure. The Hunger Games wrapped up its initial run of movies, and The Martian, a sci-fi blockbuster not attached to any franchise, made it into the top 10. Kinda looks a lot like what's coming out this year. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. If we want to talk flops, this was also the year Jupiter Ascending from the people who made The Matrix came out and just face-planted. Disney tried to make a new theme park to live-action hit with Tomorrowland, Terminator had another failed reboot, and Fanforstic ruined Marvel's first family for another decade. And in the realm of TV, The Walking Dead was still going strong, while Game of Thrones just hit season 5 and people started to see the cracks in its quality armor. Sitcoms like The Big Bang Theory were still dominating the airwaves. Dramas like Better Call Saul and Mr. Robot were new and exciting, and Marvel and Netflix just started their partnership with season 1 of a little show called Daredevil, the first of 5 planned series. That seems like a billion years ago, but it was just a decade. So much about how, why, and what we watch has changed since then. And to be honest with you, film theory has changed with it. So what I want to do today is take a look back at the history of film, how it's evolved since the art was born, and where it's going next. Matt did something similar several years back, talking about the eras of YouTube, and I believe that we're both entering a new era of YouTube and of film, and I want to have a conversation about how we have to change with it. So buckle up, loyal theorists, for this very special episode of Film Theory, diving into the history of this medium, and let's talk about the eras of film. The silent era. Movies probably go back further than you think. Some might consider stroboscopic animation to technically be movies, and those date all the way back to 1833. But the very first widely accepted motion picture was The Horse in Motion by Edward Muybridge in 1878. This blew the minds of your great-great-grandparents. A picture that moves? This led to more projects and innovations, particularly by the Lumiere brothers, as these motion pictures kept growing in length and complexity, and eventually, a new industry sprang up around this little marvel. By the 1910s, motion pictures had truly evolved into movies, with revolutionary and controversial titles like Intolerance and The Birth of a Nation. Actors and directors like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton became household names, and the foundations of cinematic language were established. What worked best to show how a character was feeling? What tricks could we do with the camera to make the audience laugh or feel uncomfortable? That sort of thing. But while this was incredibly important to film, this was just the beginning, and soon we'd be in the Golden Era. From the 30s onward, the film industry hit what I'm going to call the Golden Era. In your film history class, this would cover a lot of different chapters because a lot happened here, but for our purposes today, we're just gonna do a top-level overview. We're just gonna smush them all into one big group. And it all started thanks to the talkies. Yeah, perhaps the biggest revolution in cinematic history was the ability to synchronize audio with video, letting characters actually speak. This offered a much wider range of emotions. For instance, you can say the sentence, "I didn't mean to do that," in ways that entirely change the sentence and its meaning. It can sound angry, scared, empathetic. You can emphasize different words. And now, all of that was possible in a movie. On top of this, film technology progressed enough to capture color as well as sound. So not only were we getting movies with talking characters and soundtracks, but you could also watch some of them in color. But along with the rise of the talkies, we saw the studio system come and go. This was basically when just a few studios owned most of the industry and also owned the theaters and had long-term, often exclusive contracts with creative types like writers, directors, and actors. Basically, each of the studios owned their own piece of every part of the process. If you wanted to see a Warner Brothers star or a Warner Brothers director, it had to be in a Warner Brothers film in a Warner Brothers theater. A lot of fantastic movies came out of this system, ones that you've probably heard of even if you've never seen them. Think Citizen Kane, Casablanca, It's a Wonderful Life, Singin' in the Rain, The Wizard of Oz. But needless to say, under this system, the studios had a lot of power and they threw it around. If you completely controlled an industry like this, why wouldn't you? Competition stagnated, and it became big enough of a problem that the government stepped in and broke them up with antitrust laws, allowing for some smaller studios to step up and actually have a go at them competitively. Great! We love to see it. And this wasn't the only place that movies were getting competition, because television was also becoming a part of everyday life. Yeah, in 1950, just 9% of American households featured a TV, but by 1960, just 10 years later, that jumped all the way up to 90%. There were lots of reasons for this. The post-war economic boom, improved technology making things more affordable, and more shows that appealed to wider audiences. And alongside the newspaper, it also became the main source of news for most people, replacing the radio. Regardless, this boom in television entertainment meant that movies weren't the only option anymore, and the film industry had to step things up if they wanted to stay relevant and prevalent. And luckily, they had a secret weapon. From the 1960s up until about the 1980s, a new generation of American filmmaker exploded onto the scene. They had more creative freedom than previous generations, and in a lot of cases, wanted to tell more realistic and personal stories. Many of the titans of cinema cinema got their start here. Think Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Stanley Kubrick, just to name a few. They created movies that have stood the test of time. The Godfather, Taxi Driver, Apocalypse Now, 2001: A Space Odyssey. But even this couldn't completely recover things back to the way they were at the beginning of the golden era. In the 1940s, upwards of 60% of Americans went to the movies weekly, but that fell and hovered around just 10% by the 70s. That's fine, don't get me wrong, but the film industry needed a change if they wanted to thrive like they'd done by years gone by. Leading us to the blockbuster era. In 1975, Universal released the Steven Spielberg movie Jaws, and it pretty much changed everything. It was fast, exciting, scary, and people loved it. So much so that they saw it multiple times and were willing to wait in line to get into the cinema. It was the first modern blockbuster because often those lines stretched around the block. And Jaws was just the first of these event movies. 2 years later, George Lucas released Star Wars, which became a cultural phenomenon and basically changed the whole movie industry. While the percentage of Americans who went to the movies weekly still hovered around that 10% mark, people were willing to go back over and over to see them over and over, marveling at the special effects, or laughing at the jokes, or jumping at the scares. There was a lot of money to be made with good movies, but the industry soon spread out from theaters too. George Lucas was ahead of the game in more ways than one, taking a gamble and betting big that toys based on Star Wars were going to sell like hotcakes. And he was right. By the time he sold his company in 2012, he'd sold more than $20 billion of Star Wars toys. And that became the backbone of the Lucasfilm empire. It turned George from a filmmaker with empty pockets and big dreams into a billionaire and one of the most powerful producers on the planet. Other studios saw this and wanted a piece of that pie, and all of them started making changes to find their own Star Wars. Suddenly, movies were toyetic. There were characters, set pieces, and props created solely for the purpose of selling toys. Movies were designed to become franchises instead of individual stories, with the studios wanting worlds they could explore and exploit rather than just good films. And that only became more prominent with the rise in popularity of theme parks like Disneyland and Universal Studios. Executives were more willing to dump a lot more money into individual movies that they felt had a big chance to pop off. This was a big reason we saw the rise in IP-centric movies or other big-budget blockbusters around this time. Think Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Top Gun, Batman, Terminator, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, E.T. Movies that have become huge parts of popular culture with sequels and toys and all that jazz. Even some video games as those started to take off. Some were better than others. These became big parts of people's childhoods because the studios wanted to dominate all of their attention, and that's why so many of these franchises are still kicking it today. They were big parts of the lives of these people who then grew up and shared that love with their own kids, creating a sort of cycle, something that we've talked about before. But it became way easier for these movies and television shows to become so important to this generation because of one simple change. The home video era. In the late 70s and early 80s, a new technology started entering the market that would have massive impacts on both the film and television industries. Camcorders and videotapes started becoming cheaper, more widespread, and sure, a lot of this was used to capture memories or vacations or whatever. Well, it wasn't long until someone in Hollywood realized that they could be used for a whole lot more than filming the family picnic. In 1976, the first movie ever released on home video, a South Korean film titled The Young Teacher, was released, and while it didn't do huge numbers, it was the first of a huge wave. Like, check this. In 1980, only 1% of households had a VCR, but by 1987, that was up to 50%, with 90% expected to have one by 1990. Once people realized that they could just get movies at home, they jumped at the chance. Before this, people either had to go out to a theater or catch a movie on TV, where they were put into formats they were never intended to be watched on. They were cropped or shortened or interrupted by commercials, which just sucked. And if you wanted to watch a niche movie, a small indie movie, especially after its initial run in theaters, good luck. You had to either have your own private projector or know a theater owner willing to run it. Home video changed all of that. You could watch movies as many times as the tape would allow, or go and find really weird niche movies as long as you had the VHS. This gave a second life to those smaller indie films and gave them a real chance to breathe. But even more more importantly, home video became a huge chunk of additional money that could be made by movies that weren't necessarily going to be huge in the merch department. The actor Matt Damon actually talked about this on his episode of Hot Ones. It's a great interview, I recommend you go check it out. But the long and short of what he said, a studio could afford not to make all of their money in a movie theater because 6 months to a year after it's in theaters, it basically had a second opening on store shelves. And what's more, that movie could be making money even if it's just a small amount for years or decades to come. I mean, it was super common for people to buy multiple versions of a big movie that they liked, or catch something on TV, fall in love with it, and go out to get it so you could watch it anytime you wanted without commercials. Looking at you, Hot Fuzz. All of a sudden, mid-budget romantic comedies, or action films, or gritty mature movies could thrive because, as long as they were movies you wanted to own on VHS or DVD, they had that money coming in. Funnily enough, at first, a lot of Hollywood resisted this change. They didn't want to upset the status quo, so much so that Universal actually tried to sue Sony just for creating Betamax videotapes, which they saw as contributing to early movie piracy. They lost that suit, thankfully, and home video eventually became central to a lot of studio strategy, most infamously with the Walt Disney Company and their Disney Vault. By only releasing their films for a limited time and in limited quantities, they managed to create a sort of premium feel for their home video. And it worked. I mean, I still own all of my childhood Disney VHSs. Entire businesses popped up around renting these movies like Blockbuster Video, stores that themselves became central parts of American pop culture. It was a good time to be a movie fan, though a huge change was on the horizon. The streaming era. One of those movie rental companies was a little startup called Netflix. They had a novel idea. Instead of having to drive to Blockbuster, you could go onto their website and rent movies there, and they'd physically mail you the DVD. Mind-blowing stuff. But that wasn't the only big change around this time. In 2005, a small video sharing website called YouTube first launched. Anyone could upload any video they wanted there that could be viewed by anyone at any time. It was a game changer and kinda took off, but Netflix looked at that and thought, wait, what if we did that but for movies? So, in 2007, Netflix launched their own streaming service where you could watch your favorite movies and television all for one low monthly subscription price. To say this changed everything would be an understatement. Like, sure, it took time, but eventually, by the 2010s, the convenience, low price, and ability to watch whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, without even needing a physical DVD, everyone loved it. It was like home video but on steroids. And Netflix blew up because of it. People, myself included, ended up ditching cable in favor of that much cheaper streaming option. And it was such a good idea that throughout the 2010s, it seems like every single studio under the sun wanted to make their own streamer. Hulu, Disney Plus, Prime Video, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Apple TV, Tubi, Mubi, Quibi, Crunchyroll, HBO Go, HBO Max, HBO Max again? It became a problem, and ironically, for a while, things became even more fragmented than cable. And on top of this, well, as entertainment continued to shift in the 2010s, a new challenger entered the arena that all of film and television would need to contend with: video games. Well, kind of. See, the battle amongst these types of entertainment was no longer over who could get the most subscribers or sell the most tickets or whatever. Those things are nice, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the end-all be-all in this economy anymore. No, that was attention. In the attention economy, people only had so many hours in the day, which means that they could only do a limited number of things in a day, and therefore spend their money in limited places. Live service video games like Fortnite, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, or Destiny were how a lot of kids, teenagers, and young adults were choosing to spend their time. So much so that Netflix claimed that Fortnite was their biggest competition, not something more traditional like HBO. That in turn caused Netflix to change how they produced their content, forcing their writers and showrunners to incorporate scenes where characters are declaring that they're doing something or over-explaining what's happening in the show because they were second screen content. And it's not great. Don't love that. Bad writing. But something else that happened during this era that I don't think really gets enough attention was the rise of another platform that we mentioned here: YouTube. Like, yes, obviously, they're one of the biggest streamers in the world. Their content is just mostly from normal people rather than big studios or productions. But even more importantly than that, those normal people became way more important to the filmmaking process than ever before. As big IP like Marvel and Star Wars dominated the decade, people were hungry for spoilers, predictions, and theories, so several channels came up to fill that hunger, us included. But elsewhere, influencers became huge parts of marketing cycles. For a studio, it often made more sense to invite a few hundred or even 1,000 influencers out to do set visits or interviews with the casts of their movies, rather than relying on trailers or quote-unquote major news outlets to carry that. They were more personable, their audiences trusted them more, and they can make content much quicker. And of course, there were also major decisions made with these franchises that were driven by these influencers that were for better and for worse. I think Star Wars is probably the biggest example of this that I can think of, right? Like, I will die on the hill that the reason Episode 7 went so hard on original trilogy nostalgia were because of the incredible blanket reviews of the prequels from Red Letter Media. And of course, Disney changed direction mid-franchise after the reception of The Last Jedi and how fans and influencers talked about it, but there's no reason to relitigate that. The purpose of this is to say influencers had real influence, not only over the audience, but also over the studios. Like, hey, good example, but I was actually in a meeting with Matt and the other theorists when the first Rogue One trailer hit, and I remember saying, whoa, this trailer has an end card. Also, lots of Star Wars in this retrospective, I'm realizing. They're important movies, guys. Anyway, we were flabbergasted because here were these studios taking strategies from us YouTubers for their own uploads. Unheard of. We also had a laugh because this end card is just absolutely terrible. It's too busy, too many distractions. Come on, Disney. Come on. Anyway, though the industry was quickly moving towards streaming technology, a healthy equilibrium was found. It was common for big movies to open in theaters, then go to home and digital video, and then to streaming. So basically, it had 3 waves of conversation and money-making opportunities. Take Avengers Endgame, for instance. It hit theaters in April of 2019, where it made billions. Then it came out on DVD and Blu-ray in August of 2019, where it made another 100 million plus. And then finally on Disney Plus in November of 2019, when it became back catalog content. Interaction between the studios, the audience, and the influencers was common and, for the most part, the best for all parties. Things were good. And then, well, the world threw the film industry the biggest curveball it possibly could have. The COVID-19 pandemic hit movies hard. When people were social distancing or staying in lockdown, they couldn't go to theaters, and basically Hollywood collapsed. In 2020, the entire worldwide box office only made $12.4 billion, mostly internationally. And while only $12 billion sounds funny to say, just to put things in perspective, in 2019, the worldwide box office hit $42.5 billion. The Hollywood studios were getting desperate, understandably so, and anyone who remembers the peak of the 2020 lockdowns will know that we needed some entertainment. Netflix kept chugging as best they could. Disney released some of their bigger movies on Disney Plus through Premier Access, letting you purchase them for $30 or so, or for free like they did with Pixar's movies, arguably devaluing that brand. But Warner Brothers, well, they made a big play, one that changed movies forever. In December of 2020, Warner Brothers announced their ambitious Project Popcorn. Every movie that they were going to release in 2021 was going to premiere day and date on their streamer HBO Max for 1 month at no additional cost. And there were some heavy hitters in this lineup. Wonder Woman, The Matrix, Dune, Godzilla vs. Kong. It was a gamble, but in the short term, it was successful. HBO Max gained over 12 million subscribers that year when the box office was still struggling. And though day and date releases like this aren't really a thing anymore, the window between a movie hitting theaters and coming to a streamer has shortened. And this has had the terrible side effect of changing viewer habits. If a movie was gonna be on one of these streamers, and I can just watch it for much cheaper than going to a theater just a few weeks later, why wouldn't I do that? I can see why a lot of folks might do the math and just not go to the movies. That, along with a bunch of corporately mandated spin-off shows, turned a lot of these IP that used to be events, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, into literally weekly occurrences. It took a lot of the appeal out of them, and, well, here we are. The full impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, along with the strikes from SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild, wouldn't be felt for years to come. Seriously, some shows and movies that came out years later suffered from changes forced by the lockdowns and safety measures. One example off the top of my head for a franchise I really care about: the last 2 episodes of Season 1 of Amazon's Wheel of Time adaptation were filmed during lockdown, and there's a significant drop in the production quality because of it. And, well, film and television have never been the same since. So much so that we've entered the new era. I don't have a name for this one yet because frankly, this one's still developing, but I have a good idea of where we're going. So for now, we're gonna call this the era of you. Yes, you, dear viewer, sitting there watching this on your phone or in the background while you're playing a video game. Gone are the days where a name could carry a film or a television show. Slapping a brand onto your movie isn't a guaranteed success like it was 10 years ago. Marvel or Game of Thrones above your title can't carry your work to $1 billion anymore. That's for a lot of reasons, but a big one is the fact that people are really choosing what to show up for, what to spend their hard-earned money and valuable, limited time on this earth for, and they are rightfully being picky. And that's how a movie about racing cars, or a pair of twins fighting vampires in the South, or an anime film can stand toe-to-toe with huge IP like Jurassic World, Lilo and Stitch, and Avatar in the top 20 at the box office. I mean, arguably the biggest movie of last year was a brand new IP about K-pop stars killing demons, and that didn't even get a traditional run in theaters. Those are stories that those artists wanted to tell, and that the people watching them really connected with. They were personal. You could see so much of those artists reflected back at you in that art, and you have the power to make sure work like that keeps getting made. And really, that's happening at every level of entertainment. Sure, movies and TV are in a different place, but AAA gaming is also collapsing. Music is more fragmented than ever, with small artists finding footholds because of social media. And you know what? YouTube is changing too. It's also entering a new era. I don't know if you've noticed, but here on YouTube, the pendulum is swinging again. For years, the way to really win at YouTube was the beastification strategy. Everything needed to be bigger and better than the last thing you did, but nowadays, people are getting tired of that. Now, people just want authenticity. They want projects that people actually care about making. They want personality. They want to connect face to face with the creators making those things as they speak passionately about a disgustingly specific topic for a few hours. And that includes film and television too. Ever since taking over the role as host here on Film Theory, I've done my best to keep an eye on creators in this space, and I've noticed a pattern. Here, actually, I ran this experiment with pretty much everyone here at Theorist, but if you pull up a bunch of other big film or television YouTube channels, people like Jeremy Johns, Dan Murrell, new rock stars, those types of creators, and click on literally any of their videos, well, they all have a very specific style and format. They all have a set, whether it's full of props showing their expertise or just a colored PNG. They talk directly to camera. They have videos that can be hours long. That has become the language of film YouTube, and it's allowed those creators to make things quickly, make them longer, and start a real conversation and relationship with their audience. I want to do that too. Stuff like this awesome conversation we've had about movies and TV. Now, don't freak out. Film Theory as you know it is not going away. Think of it like this. For the last 10 years, Film Theory has been a single pillar. The type of video you expect to see week in and week out. Highly edited, voiceover, PNG bouncing around. And sure, while we've had different hooks in that pillar, think analog horror, superhero predictions, math and science episodes, that sort of thing, it still hasn't changed all that much. And don't worry, that pillar is not going away, but I want to build out what Film Theory can be. I want to evolve with the time and with our contemporaries. As YouTube changes, so must we. So what I want to do is build more pillars. I want to expand what Film Theory can be while keeping to the core of what this channel has always been. A way for us to look at the media that we love and overthink it, to look at it from new angles and perspectives and learn more about the world we live in. So while we will always do the sorts of videos we have been doing, you're gonna see other things on here too. Longer, more experimental formats and episodes that we couldn't possibly do right now in the format we have. Seriously, the team and I sat down and came up with like 100 ideas that all just really excite me, and I know that they'll excite you too. That's actually the reason I wanted to go over all of the different eras of movies, to explain the history of this industry that we all love so much. I wanted you to see just how much things have changed, how it's in a completely different place now than even just 10 years ago, just like YouTube and Film Theory are too. But the thing to always remember, we would be nothing without you, the audience, the people who trust us enough with your time to watch this fun, often silly, sometimes smart show where we connect dots that sometimes aren't there or measure the unmeasurable. And I want to say thank you for being here. Whether that's been for the last 10 years or you just found this channel through this video, as long as you want to nerd out and overthink movies, we'll be here. Here's to 10 more. And that's not a theory. It's a fact. And cut.